Welcome back, friends of the Geeks. It is the after show. We are going to be talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2, Episode 5. Ooh, things are happening. With me, as has been with me for the last 3 shows, is our good friend, Ed or Megan, that Valkyrie girl. Of course, spoilers will abound. If you've caught the show before, you'll know this is not a beat-by-beat breakdown of the entirety of the episode. It is just going to be some key points that Megan and I would like to highlight. And while you're watching this, hey, why not hit the subscribe button and maybe throw a like on here? And I don't know, maybe leave us a comment. Megan, we start back in the Dwarven Kingdom of Khazad-dûm.
We do. Yes. We saw that they were making the rings for them last episode, and this episode they have the rings. They are quickly speeding through those things. Lots of rings, very quickly rings, and we immediately get to see the effects of the rings.
We do indeed.
The effect of one ring.
The effect of one ring. So King Durin has his ring. He has all 7 of the Dwarven rings. We see them on a nice little pedestal stand, but he's actually wearing his ring. Every time we see the ring or he's being influenced by the ring, we get this little bit of whispering that's going on in the background.
Your chatters in the background.
He says later in the episode, the singers can hear the mountain, but I can see it. So almost right away, he finds a pinpoint, and then he breaks through himself, by the way, picks up a pickaxe and then breaks through what was meant to be a foundation wall, and he immediately gets to sunlight. And he then walks around with the magic ring, telling all the dwarves where exactly to dig, and everywhere the dwarves dig ends up being a shaft of light. They position the mirrors, and we're back to Khazad-dûm the way it was. In fact, there's a great moment where he's up on like a raised dais, and he's got like the big dwarves with him or whatever, and all the kingdom of Khazad-dûm is out, and he screams out Khazad, and then all of the dwarves go doom. It was a great scene, yeah. But then, of course, something starts to happen to the king throughout the course of the episode, and it piques Prince Durin's ire, and of course, he ends up going to talk to Celebrimbor about the effect.
Because it was interesting the way that they showed sort of like the creeping in of like the greed of the ring. That was one thing that in previous media they've kind of emphasized as being just like a trait of dwarves, like it's a problem that they have, and it's interesting that they're specifically saying he's never been a greedy man, this is something specific from this ring. Like, it wasn't something that was amplified, it was something that was, like, added to his personality, it seems like.
Now, to be fair, the gentleman that was saying he was never a greedy man was another dwarf. So my guess is he probably wasn't a greedy person by dwarven standards. He probably had the same sort of level of inherent greed that's typical to that particular those particular peoples. The ring has simply amplified it to its and then with the Spinal Tap, it's turned it up to 11. So this ring goes to 11 on the greed scale. So yes, King Durin obviously kind of having a bit of an issue before we flash back over to our friends Celebrimbor and Anatar, who are arguing over whether or not they should even make rings for men.
Right. Oh, it was interesting to see Celebrimbor have a semblance of a backbone against Anatar for a little bit there. He's like, this is a bad idea and I'm not going to do it. And then Anatar's like, okay, I accept your boundary that you're not going to do this, but I'm going to do it.
Like, if you're not going to help me, then I'm going to do it myself. Yep. Again, very clumsy sort of, and there's even like a huge long beat pause. Like Celebrimbor's like, no, we're not making them. And Anatar's like, okay, we're not making them. Okay. I'm just going to walk down the stairs all dramatic. Like, oh, by the way, I'm going to do it myself.
Yep.
Da, da, da. We finally got a sense of like how many people are at the forge that are kind of assisting them with the rings.
Yeah.
So there's a dozen elves
like
there.
10 or 11 other people there that are assisting and working on this.
And no one's picking up that this dude's a piece of shit. Like, nobody's like suspicious of this manipulative person. Like, we are picking up on his manipulation so quickly and easily. And I know it may be like, oh, because we know he's Sauron, but I don't know that that's it.
I would say I was very confused also because when that elf went invisible and was like wearing the ring to resize it and whatever, when she went into the other world and could see Sauron for what he is, like the flaming beast with whatever, that's the same sort of thing that they had Frodo being able to do, but he could like pinpoint where the things were. Like, she seemed to take the ring off and then immediately not know who it was or what it was that she saw, even though no one had moved.
to be fair, again, the ring, the movie universe and this show universe are based on the same work, but they're not technically happening in the same timeline, universe, whatever. Because we don't see what she's seeing, we can't really know how that's going to be portrayed once they do show us. So there may be a reason why she's saying that she just saw this. It's sort of like a little bit later in the episode when the Queen asked Elendil what he saw when he grasped the Palantir, and it turns out he sees something completely different from what she's seeing. But either way, she and he are not using it in the manner with which it was being used in the films. In the films, it was being used to communicate almost directly with Sauron and get a glimpse into his mind and see what he had in store. Clearly, that's not what's happening with the Palantir on the show. So obviously, they're making distinctions between what you saw in the films and what you're going to see on the show. So it will be interesting to see once they show somebody wearing one of the rings of men. We do confirm one thing, though, that was from the film, that I am assuming is from the lore and from the books, is that putting on one of the rings of men turns you invisible. Can I make a point, by the way, talking about the Palantir in particular and the scene between the Queen and Elendil? It seems like such a minor quibble, but why not white the Queen's eyes out? Either through contacts or in post.
So much.
Yeah, they've not done a really good job of even shooting her in such a way that she truly looks like she's without sight. It doesn't look that way at all. If you didn't know, if you just picked up the show in the middle and you didn't know,
you'd have no idea this lady was blind. And I feel like maybe I have like unrealistic expectations because I watched Daredevil when that came out, and the actor for Matt Murdock did such a good job of looking like he was blind. Like his eyes didn't move to focus on anything when he didn't have glasses on. And she's a good actress, but she's not great at this particular skill.
No. So to Amazon Prime watching, white her eyes out. She lost her sight in an explosion.
Just give her contact lenses, even if they're not fully white. Just like put the
do it in post. It doesn't matter if she's uncomfortable wearing the contacts. Do it in post, but do something to indicate, or put a bandage over her eyes. Something, anything that prevents it from looking the way it does. Because last week you mentioned that, and I was like, and then this week I'm like, oh yeah, it's not.
She's
good.
turning,
really
she's
bad.
Looking at him, she's doing all these things while they're talking in the dark. So it's not even like if she wasn't fully blind, she could still kind of see. Like this was not a well lit scene. She shouldn't have been able to see shit.
Speaking of Numenor, there was a couple of things that happened within Numenor other than the Queen and her janky ass eyes and the Palantir, which, by the way, clearly the Palantir is going to play a role. It looks like it's
now Farazan is like walking up to it as well.
Yeah, it's going to play a fairly significant role, but I guess I wasn't paying close enough attention in season 1, but I completely either forgot or just didn't realize that Elendil's daughter is one of the ones that's paired up with Farazan and Palantir. As soon as he went over and she was like, father, I was like, oh shit.
I also forgot
that's his daughter.
Last episode, I was like, yeah, his son's girlfriend. I'm like, nope, that's his sister.
No,
cool.
That's his sister. Yeah. And by the way, if you weren't clear on who the bad guys were in Numenor, it's clearly her and the son. We actually only get one single scene with Farazan, but we get a whole whack of scenes with the son. Yeah. And we get a couple of scenes.
Is a piece of shit, and I am very excited for when he hopefully eventually dies.
It's very mustache twirly, like
super mustache.
We're gonna come into the oldest shrine in Numenor and we're gonna shut it down and kick everybody out because we're gonna put in an aqueduct, and this holy relic that you guys are all like, I'm just going to smash it. Like, it's almost a little too mustache twirly, you know what I mean? Like, we get it.
It feels like they're trying to lean too hard into making him like Joffrey-ish.
Yeah, to make him just completely unlikable. Don't worry, Amazon. You're already there. We already don't like him. We get it. Know when to kind of back off a little bit, or at least make it a little bit more subtly done.
Yeah,
where it doesn't
give
have
some
to be
sort of real world justification for why he's such an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I don't think that's going to be going away anytime soon, especially now that he essentially, the son stabbed an unarmed man in the back, and now Elendil is crushed about the whole thing. So we get it.
In his mind, both his son and his second in command, his surrogate son.
Right. I will admit, though, I had it's maybe a little bit too old for you, the reference, but I when they were all turning in their tunics because they were all being sort of fired from the service, and Elendil gives up his sword, and then goes to walk away, and then all the guys around him are like, "Oh, Captain, yes, hi, Captain." Like they're all like saluting him.
Yeah,
it's very much reminded me of Dead Poet Society when they all stand up on their desks and they're all saying, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." I'm like, wow, it's essentially that scene. Like he's been fired. Now he's like doing his walk of shame, but all his men around him are like, "No, oh, Captain, my Captain." I'm like, all right, cool. Like it's a nice little like, if it's not meant to be a nod to that, you basically just ripped it off. But I'm hoping it was meant to be a nod to that specifically. I do like how they're treating the wearing of the ring, in particular with King Durin, because they do go back to him sort of one final time there in the mountain when he's speaking with the newly reinstated Prince Durin.
Yes, he's got his fancy little bronze collar again.
His fancy little bronze collar. It looks like they're treating it like a drug, because when he takes it off and he doesn't have it, he immediately grows agitated and suspicious of other people for wanting it. Like they're treating it very much like someone that's addicted to it, someone that's harboring some sort of a really bad addiction to it, and if he doesn't have it, he's craving it, he wants it, he needs to have it. I like how they're treating it. It makes it seem more plausible that even he wouldn't realize how much he's changed since he's put the ring on. And even if it's going to be pointed out to him, it's like reasoning with a junkie. You can't. There's no reasoning with a junkie. They just want the fix. And every time he's talking about the ring, or he sees the ring, or he looks at the ring, you can just see it that he needs his fix. He has to have it. So another little item that I keep noticing now, because they've done it a few times, is Celebrimbor is touchy. He likes to put his hand on people, like on their shoulder or on their arm or whatever. And every single time he does it to Sauron or Anatar or Halbrand or whatever the balls we're calling this dude, he'll put his hand on his shoulder, he'll put his hand on his shoulder, and then he'll remove it, and then Sauron will look down where he touched him for like more than a second. Like he'll just look down where he touched him, like he's annoyed that he's been touched by this guy, and then he'll resume the conversation. If you've not noticed this, gang, when the next time you're watching it, take a look at any interactions between Celebrimbor and Anatar. It's a cool little thing that the actor's doing every time. I don't know if he's doing that intentionally. I don't know if he's been directed to do that, or it's just something he's chosen to do. But it's a neat little touch. It gives him a little bit more menace, because right now he's not terribly menacing. So it gives him a bit of an edge. Yeah,
of the like, contact with the mortals.
How could you possibly be? And then we weren't quite done with the manipulations yet. There was one final manipulation at the end. Again, a very juvenile, a very simple manipulation, but basically like, well, we tried to make them and we failed. And now that failure comes back on you, Celebrimbor, because you lied about what you were doing at the Forge with your deceitful letter to the High King. So now that drags you back in. And not only are we going to make 9 rings for the Rings of Men, but those 9 rings are going to draw upon the power of the 3 Elven rings, and hopefully set the 7 Dwarven rings aright, I guess is what they're trying to say. So
you need to fix them. It'll be what completes their crafting and makes everything right with their work again.
Now, there was one other particular thing that you had mentioned to me privately a few episodes ago.
Balrog, Balrog, Balrog.
Now, we still don't see it. Again, if you're watching this, you've already seen the episode, so you know we don't see it. But again, there's a very tropey, cliche, convoluted way that we get Disa into this cavern with this lake or whatever, because she bought this bauble that rolled 1,000 feet to get to this secluded spot where nobody would know. She acted like she had never seen this particular cavern with this naturally
this part
occurring.
Of the mountain.
So she goes to sing to the mountain to, I don't know, maybe figure out where she is, or how it relates or whatever.
And she gets a response from...
She sure does.
The depths of the mountain. And later on, Durin the Younger says to Durin the Older that it sounds like an ancient evil has been awoken. So if you weren't clear on what the rumblings were that Disa heard, now you know it was in fact the Balrog. We do see the design for the door.
Yes.
That we can only access by as a celebration, by the way. It was always wondered in the movies, why does a door in the Dwarven Kingdom only open with an Elven word? It's one of sort of the plot holes from the Peter Jackson films, but now we know why.
There's a reason.
because the door is put in as a celebration of the partnership between the elves and the dwarves when it came to the Rings of Power, and how the Rings of Power saved the Dwarven Kingdom, or at least from having to come up to the surface and such. Everyone knows the Balrog lives there. Everyone knows that we want to see it. So, I mean, there's going to be some... We've already got an early reference to it. Yeah, I think we mentioned this on earlier episodes too, where the timeline of events... Like last week, they just talked about making the Dwarven rings, and this week, not only do they make them, but the dwarves have them, and one of them is using it, and now they've already started making the Rings of Men.
They're going through it very quickly. I figured they would have the Dwarven rings by the end of this season, but I thought it would be like the end of this season, and then the men's one would be next season. But
right, yeah, and that does not seem to have been the case.
Nope.
Yeah,
which is another thing. Whenever they're talking about like the timeline of making these rings, and Anatar is very pushy about like it needs to happen now. We can't wait. We can't talk about this tomorrow. I need to talk about it to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
The speed at which things are happening, or the speed he's pushing for, I think is part of what makes the manipulations have to be so much more obvious. I think if they were making it a little bit like slower, he could be a little more like subtle and sneaky.
Yeah, I still feel like we could be doing a little bit better of a job than like something a 5-year-old would be doing on a schoolyard playground, but I do understand your point with the rapidity that they're getting to a point where all the rings are going to be created seemingly before the end of this second season. I mean, Amazon's committed to 5 seasons. So are we going to get 3 whole seasons where the rings already exist and are being utilized? And then when do we see the forging of the one ring to rule them all in the darkness, bind them? Like, where do we...
I mean, at the rate they're going, I would think it would be by the end of the season, which seems way too quick.
So that's what I mean. Are we going to see an ultimate showdown between Adar and Sauron, and somehow allow Sauron to take charge of the armies of Mordor and begin to launch his attack? Because you got to remember too, especially when we're seeing the films do show you some glimpses of Sauron attacking the realms of men, but it is in a flashback, and that flashback is meant to take place thousands of years before the events of the Lord of the Rings. So it would not be unseemly if they wanted to get to a point where all the rings are made, have already started to corrupt their users, and he already has designed the one ring and is wearing it. I mean, if they really wanted people to talk about the show and get into it, Sauron and Adar fighting each other, and then Sauron mustering his armies and waging his war against the realms of men and elves and dwarves, wearing the armor while wearing the ring. It's kind of what we all paid our money for, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
So it may not very well be that this is simply the story of the forging of the Rings of Power, but the story of the using of the Rings of Power. And that's where all that would lead, I would assume. But we don't know. We're 5 episodes into the second season, and we got lots of TV to go. So
what we do find out at the very end is Adar actually grabbed Galadriel because they want to work together, or at least he wants to work with her, because it's like, we've got a common enemy. We both hate Sauron.
Well, everybody.
Let's both fight Sauron.
Everybody but Celebrimbor hates Sauron, and now this new elven girl at the Forge who looks like Galadriel, according to Sauron, as he so easily manipulates her as well. Everybody hates Sauron. This isn't everybody loves Raymond or everybody hates Chris. This is everybody hates Sauron for sure, because it behooves your point that I think you made in a previous episode that we talked about it. How in the balls does this guy take control of the orcs and the oryx and the goblins and all of that if they all hate him too? Like,
everybody hates this guy.
So
everybody hates him.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I have to admit, the dwarves are kind of my favorite part of the show thus far, so I'm hoping we're going to get more of that. Why don't you tell us your favorite part of the show so far in the comments below? And otherwise, we will see you next week. Stay geeky, everyone.